So you ask yourself, why do I have this weight tied onto my throw line cord? Well, I made a good shot, but I needed to pull the rope up and have it flop over a branch that I didn't want so that it would be a straight shot. So let me explain this a little better. I shot the throw bag up and over where I wanted it to, but this side was capturing a limb. So if I'd have pulled my climbing line all the way up and over, this lower limb would have been part of it. And I got to thinking, there might be a time that I'd want to capture the lower limb, but I'd like to get my climbing line or another rope up there as well. So I did it. I tied that big brick on the bottom. I also tied my climbing line on there, and I pulled it up and over and back down. So I had two things I was working on. I wanted to see if it was possible to bring my line over another rope or another limb, as well as retrieve the back end of the throw ball. And that sounds complicated. I couldn't use the weight because that was on the other side. This is what I did. Did you get that? But putting the weight on there, it worked out good. Then I was able to use the throw ball or the throw bag launcher, the APTA, to set another rope for a pulley. So we didn't want to run the lowering line over a crotch of the neighbor's tree. We got permission, but we used a pulley so that there wouldn't be any abrasion to the crotch. Now what we've got here is, it's an orchard walnut. It's an old tree, and the upper portion, which is the graft union, is the English walnut, and it had completely died, and it was very, very rotten. So we utilized the neighbor's tree as both a roping point to stay safe up in the tree, as well as lowering some of these pieces. The job went pretty smooth. Jorge climbed, I did the roping, and sometimes you got to be really, really careful. Look at how close Jorge is working with those ropes, and it's something that you really have to have super good control of the chainsaw, but also know where the ropes are at all times. It's an awareness that's really important. So we had a brand new fence underneath us. We had concrete underneath us. We set up some pieces of wood on the ground so it wouldn't smack the concrete and break it. There was also the building on the other side with some windows. It wasn't a big tree, but it was a complicated environment. And this is last job of the year, heading off to Colorado to celebrate Christmas with my daughter and my family. And this was Friday's job. Fortunately, it wasn't too complicated, but the roping on this job was really quite fun. And we did drop a few pieces, but we made sure that there was wood underneath so it wouldn't smack the concrete. Surprisingly, even though the tree was totally dead, the wood was still very, very wet and very heavy. Sometimes I like to get a shot with the climber with the sun directly behind them. It makes interesting silhouette shots. There were multiple limbs on this tree. We started off by taking off the lower limb, which was an easy drop onto the ground. And Jorge went up on the roof with the extended chainsaw tip on the pole that works really well for reaching out and getting some branches cut down. And he was able to get all the brush off of that piece, but then we still had to end up climbing the last bit to take it down in pieces. Some of it we dropped, some of it we roped. It was all dependent upon what the situation was like at the time. Now, the tree had been topped in the past. You can see it was all hollowed out, and that certainly led to the demise of this tree. One piece at a time. That's the safest, easiest, fastest way to get it down, because you can process everything as you go as well. Did keep that wood pile going. Didn't want anything smacking solid on the concrete and breaking it. Got out my MS500i. That is a carburetorless chainsaw. It's fuel injected. It's a real powerhouse of a saw. I love it. Expensive, but boy, Can't recommend it enough. I love that saw. So we get down to the bottom here, and this is the graft union of the black walnut and the English walnut. And if you look closely, you can see the graft union in the wood, which makes for some really beautiful lumber. Even a small piece of black walnut like this is worth its weight in gold. Yeah. When it comes to the value of wood, everybody loves black walnut. And all the woodworkers I know, they are always looking for this quality of wood. Even a small piece with some decay pockets, and there were some imperfections in here. That big hole on the outside, on the back of the tree, led to some internal decay pockets. And if you look real close, there's all kinds of critters coming out and little things in the wood, but the grain pattern on this wood was extraordinary. A little bit later on, you'll see I washed off these pieces to get a better idea of what we're talking about. And people say, well, what are you going to do with it? Well, black walnut, you can turn it into anything. I mean, even small bits can be used for knife handles, knife scales. It had some termites in there. That was a bit of a surprise. So I freehand cut these slabs. They're not perfect by any means, but I didn't want to just cut it up into firewood and haul it away that way. I wanted to get slabs that I can work on the bandsaw and process them and then ultimately straighten them up. There's a lot you can do with these great big slabs. Turning blocks as well. Beautiful, beautiful. I love working with the graft union on a turned bowl. Right in the center of the bowl, it's an amazing piece of, it's kind of the history of the tree and seeing the union between the two trees, the union of the English and the black. Makes for beautiful wedding gifts. I've given out a number of turned bowls with the graft union, and I tell a little story. I call the story The Union of the English and the Black. I don't know what that was. I thought it was a nail, but it doesn't appear to be. The saw marks are kind of ragged, which led me to think I hit something, but it cut okay. And then I had this little guy come out of this hole inside the tree. I didn't cut into him, slug, and a black widow spider came out. That was kind of an interesting thought. You always have to be careful where you put your hands when you're working with trees. Oh, here we go. These are the pieces after I rinsed them off, got the sawdust off, and you can see the grain patterns in there. It's so wild. It's really, really pretty. Even the imperfections these days, a lot of people like to fill them with resin and colored resins or mica powders and all kinds of stuff, or you can, fill them up with epoxy and put ebony sawdust in there, big black spots. An imperfection that's filled can become a real asset in your final project. Kind of like people I know. Have a great holiday. So this year it's Christmas in Colorado. We're racing off to get to my daughter's house in Aurora, Colorado. We're at the Denver airport on the train trying to get out to rent a car. We're actually renting a pickup truck this year. We're going to have a white Christmas for a change. That's my daughter Shelby. We're at her house the next morning, and it is cold, cold, cold. I went from sunny California weather to icy, windy, freezing weather. I'm not used to this at all, but it's kind of a nice change. So I decided to go for a walk this early Christmas Eve morning. I should have put on a better coat because it is freezing out here. So I'm using the Insta360 camera here. I'm going to play with it a little bit, give you a better idea of some of the things it can do. It has 2 lenses, and I'm pretty impressed with this camera. I'm still playing with it. I'm still playing with the editing, seeing what kind of cool stuff we can do. But it's been fun. So at this point, I'm going to wish you guys all a very, very happy holidays and a great new year. So stay tuned for more videos. Thanks a lot.